Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I am your co-host, JP Jump House, for the two-man power trip. Of course, joining me is my co-host, Mr. Trump Mania, the wizard himself, Mr. Lavi Margolin. Lavi, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. It seems like in New York, and I'm sure in New Jersey as well, it just keeps raining and raining. I haven't been following that closely. I thought it was like one hurricane, figuring it would pass, but here we go again.
Never ending. This stuff just never stops. Unfortunately, as far as the rain here in the Northeast, which absolutely sucks. But as far as the wrestling world is concerned, you went to yet another wrestling show. Where did you go? Catalyst?
Yeah, it actually surprised me because I got a message from our friend Matt Ryan at Catalyst saying that the show is now closer to you, and I was like, what's he talking about? Because I know it's like all the way out there in Brooklyn. They seem to have really found their one of their niches in terms of like partnering with like a cool restaurant with enough outdoor space that you could have a show, people would buy food, everyone was happy. But a torrential day, like the day that we're recording here, and it ended up being moved not too far from where I work, actually, in Upper Manhattan in Harlem at the YMCA. So it was an adventure because that night is the Jewish holiday Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. So I couldn't stay for very long. I went for just an hour, but I just wanted to check it out. And really, for turning a show around in a day, it was quite an amazing feat. There was a fair amount of fans there. Like, it's sort of maybe not to the extreme of like the UFC having to pick up from Brooklyn and go to like Alabama in a day or something like that. But it was a nice sized crowd, and I thanked Matt because Masha Slamovich went on first. So I one of my favorite performers. So I got to see her and just got a sense of what was going on there. Colby Carino was there. A number of notable stars and wrestlers. So cool to see. You don't always see wrestling in Manhattan proper. So nice to see. And I really think that if the logistics and monetarily it makes sense, I think it'd be a nice place that they could keep building upon. There's an upper track. Also, I don't know if there's like for regulations if you can have like fans seated up there, but it would make for like a cool atmosphere.
So you did have a good time, though. A nice venue.
Yeah, it was. I was imagining it a lot closer to the subway that I got off, but I kept walking and walking and walking. It was sort of maybe just off of Fifth Avenue, where kind of still officially the west side for people that are familiar with the logistics. But it was just fun, and I was glad I made it, even though like I had been to Sukaban on Thursday night as a married dad. I don't typically go to so many shows in a row, but
Yep.
just popped down there for a bit, and it was a good time.
Nice. What is going on with Endeavor?
So, really interesting note from our friends at Bloody Elbow that Endeavor has been charging a fee to the UFC and will be charging a fee to WWE. So basically, Endeavor charging a fee to their spin-off company for services. Endeavor has received a management fee of 25 million every year for the UFC. This service fee will rise to 35 million next year. The WWE will also be paying a 25 million service fee next year, which will rise to 35 million a year later. After which the service fee for both of them will rise to 1% annually. So maybe it's not so good to have stock in the spin-off of a parent company when the parent company can decide that they can charge you fees. I'm sure it's for good reasons, but here's 70 million off the eventually, and maybe more. People that want to do the percentage increases, eventually 70 million off the top of TKO every year, whether they're having a good year or bad year. And I think that they can charge them for other services and fees as well. So sometimes like you could spin off a company, but you could pull out, I wouldn't say a lot of its value, but some of its value or some of its profits through this consulting fees.
Wow, wow, very interesting. I did not have any idea about that. That kind of changes the game a little bit for them. I mean, that's absolutely crazy. But Lavi, we have a special guest joining us right now. What is going on, Mr. Jonathan Ashe, the producer, technical director, outlaw extraordinaire?
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, Jonathan, so good to connect with you. It's feels like somebody that I know on Twitter forever, um, and another upstater. So I think we're upstate is ahead of downstate, and these two regions are far and away the leaders of that. So before turning it over to John, like we know the Buffalo Boys in terms of the talent performance, but I think there's like a whole slew, including Brandon Thurston. I think even Brett Lauderdale is originally from upstate. We had learned in one of the interviews. So like, what's going on there? Everyone just loves wrestling and wants to get involved.
Yeah, pretty much. I think this area's always been like a sleeper area for wrestling. Um, we've always had companies up here that draw 3 to 5, 600 fans. Um, it's always been a steady market. Unfortunately, the problem is like we're so far away from any major metropolis. Like trying to get attention from New York fans, from Chicago fans, from Philly fans. It's just like we're like on an island unto ourselves. Like you said, there's a lot of untapped talent up here, and including uh, non wrestling people like me, like you said, Brett Lauderdale, Thurston, WrestleTix, the WrestleTix guys up here too. So yeah, we Rob Black also is from Rochester, coincidentally. So
It's not your fault. No,
no, no, no.
no. But also
Um,
Mookie
yes,
and
yes.
WrestleMap also. So and some guests, some people that we wanted to be guests. So that's pretty cool. John.
When did you start getting into the wrestling business? When did you become a fan? Obviously, upstate New York, probably a WWF guy, no?
Oh yeah, definitely. WWF used to come up here once a month. I want to say at that point, I was born and raised in Buffalo, so we used to go to the Niagara Falls Convention Center, which right now is a casino, but used to be a hotbed for WWE back in the early '90s when business took a downturn and they were downsizing their venues. Um, from my earliest memory of wrestling was walking by the TV when I was 9 years old, and my dad always watched it and had seen Doink the Clown, and just thinking like that's very weird. Um, and from there, just started watching with my dad and becoming a fan of WWF. Eventually, figuring out what TBS was and watching uh, WCW from there. Um, and I grew from there. I remember in 1996 watching the Sunshine Network, watching ECW, getting the magazines, and then like the early 2000s, 2002, we had a few wrestling feds start coming up here in Buffalo, and I remember like emailing one of them, one of the promoters, and just said like, "Hey, I've always wanted to get into wrestling," and his response was, "Come to the show and we can talk," which related to him getting me to buy a ticket to go to the show. Um, But yeah, that company was Buffalo Championship Wrestling. They've gone away, come back a few times, but basically started there with Ring Crew, and it started from my second show. The promoter coming up and saying, "Hey, I have no one to run music. Do you mind running music?" And okay, so I started running music there. I eventually trained to wrestle. Had a few matches weren't that good. Um, Also, I don't like working out. I like food. So for me, it really wasn't a thing. I became a ref. I ref for about 12 years. But then, like the same thing that happened with BCW, where you get a few feds that come up to me and be like, "Hey, we don't have a ref spot, but we need someone to run music. We need like we have video. Do you know how to edit video?" And it just grew from there of like just realizing I should be indispensable as much as I can and learning every aspect of wrestling to basically where I am now, being producer for GCW.
How did you get into the production? Did you go to school for that?
Nope. Learned everything on the job. A lot of Googling, a lot of YouTube videos, just learning as I go. My home fed up here in Buffalo is ESW, which like Thurston came from as well. Um, their promoter had asked me once, "Hey, I want to buy these entrance lights. How do we program them?" I said, "I have no clue, but I'll find out." And I just Googled it, figured out how to program lights through DMX, and we went from there. Another show, he asked me about setting up a projector and having entrance videos, and and connecting that to the venue TVs. Googled it, figured it out. So a lot of it's just learning on the job, and even going into streaming. How I got into streaming was basically the same thing. The SW Proto had asked me in 2018, "Hey, streaming's becoming a thing. We should try to stream a show. Can you figure out how?" And I went to Best Buy, bought a new iMac, did some research, and we streamed on Twitch. Wasn't that good. Far cry from what streaming is nowadays. But basically, like that was the beginning of how I learned, and then just growing from there.
As far as like getting into the business, is that something you always kind of wanted to do, or like you said, it almost kind of stumbled into it?
Um, yeah, I want to say yes. I really had no other plan. Um, Getting to school, I was a bookworm, and I had ideas of like going to college for uh, anything tech related, but really in the back of my mind it was always something wrestling related. And even now, I'm 39, and throughout the last 20 years, any day job I've had has just been to fund my wrestling dreams, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Now let's hand over to Lavi. I know Lavi's got a ton of good questions for you.
Sure. So let's get the fun one out of the way. Like, what was the biggest technical disaster that probably wasn't your fault? It was the venue's fault. That like it was just one of those days. Like you fixed one thing, something else fell apart, and you kind of learned from that.
Um, GCW in Detroit last year in April, I think it was. Um, we had some weird issue, and I still chucked it up to the internet connection or a combination of Fight. I know Fight probably doesn't want me to blame them, but we still haven't figured it out, but it hasn't happened since. Where the show starts, everything's fine. Within 5 minutes, we lose audio, but I don't know we lost audio because all of my systems are working. And I had Joey Janela run up to me and tell me it's all over Twitter that no one has audio. And I rushed in to try to fix it. I eventually figured out I had to take the stream offline and reboot it and bring it back. 5 minutes later, lose sound again. So every 3 to 5 minutes, the stream had to go down to bring it back up to get audio. Thankfully, that hasn't happened since. I think we determined there was an issue with the internet line. Fight showed me some statistics, showed me the internet in the venue just kept dropping. So I don't know if that was the cause or that was the result, but thankfully that hasn't happened since. And we get occasional issues, especially with GCW, where we have about 80 shows a year. So you're bound to get a few issues every once in a while. 2 weeks ago in Liverpool, we had an issue where the audio was out of sync, but all my systems were correct. So it's one of those things where you just try to do self-diagnostics and figure it out while the internet's blowing up, telling you to fix the audio.
So when did you work your first GCW show and build up the rapport with Brad, and sort of what's that journey been like? I was fascinated about hearing about your travels. I have a follow-up question, but not to make it too complex.
I started about 2 years ago. I started working for GoPro Wrestling, which is out GPW, a production company out of New Jersey, and they were doing They were doing a lot of the smaller time indies. They started with GCW, and they had a wedding. A member, a camera op, was getting married, so no one could make it to a GCW show. And I got the call. I did about 3 smaller events for them. I did XWA in Rhode Island. I did Polyam Cult, and uh, another show at Richfield Park in New Jersey. And they felt confident enough to give me the NGI 5, I believe it was, Nick Gage Invitational in Chicago, which is a pretty big deathmatch tournament. But they gave me that in Detroit. I like to think I did well because shortly after that, Brad had asked me if I can do Dallas and Houston. Dallas and Houston went fine, and it just grew from there. I still wasn't the primary producer. Brett was still using a mix of guys, but I like to think that over time I proved my worth by just being really good at what I do and being successful and not really having any issues. I think the one that just cemented me with GCW was my first LA trip. It was for an LA fight show, and at that point, Brett was using Dave Marquez and his crew, and his entire crew got COVID 2 days before the show. So I get a message from Brett, the infamous Yo, asking me if I want to go to LA. I said sure, and he said, "Okay, you're leaving in 36 hours." So I had Buffalo Bills tickets for that weekend that I just had to let go to waste. But yeah, flew to LA, did that show, knocked it out of the park, and ever since then, Brett has used me since. And even when we have bigger events, international events, when we use local crews, he makes a point to make sure that I'm there to, at the very least, supervise, if not run the events.
Yeah, that was the part that really caught my eye on Twitter, where you're the primary member, maybe the only member of the production team flying out there, and there's all these international shows, and you have to connect with these people, I assume, who communicate in some form of English, depending on who they are and where it is, and make it work. What's that like?
It can be a challenge. UK is great. UK, the team's great. They a lot of the team there also works with Progress, so they're awesome. WXW, little language barrier, but they're an awesome crew as well. Mexico was a little bit of a challenge. Mostly, you just have to learn what zoom in and zoom out mean in Spanish. In Japan, it's kind of flying blind. We have an interpreter, and he's also on headsets with me. So if I have to communicate something, I'll say it. Then the translator will translate it to Japanese for the crew. So it can be a challenge. We do have one cameraman going with me for the Corrigan Hall show, so hopefully it'll be a little bit smoother. But working with local ops is something that we've been doing more and more recently. Up until a few months ago, we were still traveling. As long as it was within driving distance, we were using our standard GPW camera crew. But now, just to streamline a lot of operations, I'll use local camera ops pretty much everywhere now. And it's sort of stressful but rewarding at the same time. It's stressful working with different crews, but also there's a lot of talented camera ops out there that are undiscovered, that either need more work or just need the attention, get their name out there. And I've got a crew in the Midwest. I've got a crew in Alabama now. I got a crew in California. I got a crew in Texas. And it's a lot of them just also need guidance too. And it's very rewarding to help them and mentor all of them, because the business needs more quality production people. It's very few and far between.
Does the size of the crowd change the way you're producing it? So probably John and I are people that talk most about like the minutia of this, sort of like Atlantic City has this many rows this time, this many rows. Like sometimes, GCW shows in Atlantic City are like, they're coming out the door or whatever, and sometimes it's like, oh, okay, it's 4 rows deep. So like, does that change at all, or it just stays like standard?
I think there's a lot less pressure if the crowds are smaller. Um, Brett's not nitpicking about camera angles as much if it's a smaller crowd. Um, but like we take we don't look at it as just throwaway shows, but I feel like the shows like AC, um, like New York, like Melrose, the new venue in Brooklyn, like uh, Los Angeles, they're just bigger shows in general, and there's more eyes on them just because of a lot of them are storyline based, where there might be like storyline progression. So there is a lot more stress on those particular shows, especially with the crowd, and especially if there's spots happening, like with Cage of Survival in Atlantic City in June, where Blake Christian played a cameraman, jumped in the ring and attacked Masha and won the belt. That took a lot of planning and a lot of coordination to get that right. Where most times in GCW, we might know a few spots if a wrestler's going to come up and let us know, but most of the time it's just go out there and fly blind. But it definitely helps, and like certain moments like that, like the Blake Christian title win we're very proud of, just because the way everything came off, and I think that was probably like our best moment production wise.
Probably the most notable moment in terms of maybe like a GCW scene was when Matt Cardona, I think when he won the belt, and then people started throwing things towards the ring. I don't think it actually included any pizza cutters, but that's up for debate. But has there, like, I'm not sure if you were part of the crew then, but like, has there ever been a time where you're like, this is too much, I need my guys out of there, like, there's a certain point?
Yeah, I wasn't part of the company at that point, but I can't remember a time where it's gotten bad. I mean, the Blake Christian title win where everyone threw garbage in the ring, which we knew was coming. We knew the fans were going to replicate the Cardona incident. But our cameramen posted up next to the ring post, and our cameramen, at least for the Northeast, are very fearless. They're fine with that. When you're working with local camera ops, I usually have to explain to them like the shots we want, the shots that Brett and I both want, and I always mention glass, I mention light tubes, and I preface it by saying if you want to wear protective eyeglasses, it's up to you. For glass panes in the corner, I'm like, the best shot is from behind, but if you don't feel comfortable about it, you don't have to. And most cameramen are like, no, we're fine. We'll get behind it. One thing I always tell my cameramen, like, above all else, protect the camera. We have a joke that your health insurance deductible is a lot less than what repairing a camera would be. So protect the camera. But yeah, for the most part, we never had an incident where I've really had to tell cameramen, like, get the fuck out of there, thankfully.
So in terms of like death matches or different things like that, is there like a certain like best practice where it's sort of like you could get a tight shot, but it's just too much right now, or maybe there's a shot like that would be extra appealing, or let's go wide, there's the blood is pumping out, or something like that, something that's very visual. How do you manage that?
I usually tell our cameramen to just shoot everything. If the blood's getting out, shoot it, and then I'll make determination, working the switcher, if I want to be on that shot. The only thing I tell them to avoid is obviously anything, pulling back the camera, anything that involves blading. So obviously, you could tell if someone's going that route. So, uh, so I always tell them, like, if they see that, like, don't shoot that. Obviously. Um, Other than that, if someone's gushing blood, I always tell them, like, shoot it, and I'll make the determination if we shouldn't have it on the shot, or if anything where maybe a wrestler's talking to the referee, but it's obviously something we shouldn't shoot. That might be something I tell them not to. But overall, even if it's something that we don't use live, we're big on putting stuff out on Twitter afterwards. So if it's something that I'm not on the camera, if the live stream's not on it, at least we have the footage as well that we might use down the line.
So, in terms of the other work that you're doing in this field, at least from your Twitter bio and from most visibly, is with MLW. So, as is natural with promotions, there's certain flare-ups that happen, and it goes back as far as time. But from a modern day, when Court started MLW, and then there was ROH, the owners would be like. In little tips back and forth. So we've seen a little bit of the flare up there. So like, do you just don't comment on it? You just come and do your job, or like, is there ever like a pressure somehow to like pick sides?
No, because there's a lot of workers that work both sides. So it's just like in any aspect of pro wrestling, any indie wrestling, where it's always the promoters always have beef, but the workers never do. Just don't wear any GCW t-shirts or hats at MOW and vice versa. But no, like, never any issue. Cord and his guys have no issue with us doing GCW. Brett doesn't care about us doing MOW. They just always look at it as just make money anywhere you can.
So with recent MLW tapings, of course, at 2300 Arena, it looks like the logistics have shifted. I think that, from what I can gather, like less fans being there, so it's sort of like less rows are open, or maybe like the venue is just like 3/4 open as opposed to it all being open. How has that like been shot differently recently?
I don't think we really shot it any differently, but MOW, like, Court has certain ways he likes wrestling shot compared to what we're used to at GCW or other indie feds. So a lot of it's just a challenge of, like, your instinct to get certain shots are always different per what the promoter wants. But the 2300 Arena is probably the best place to shoot TV for an indie fed, just because the lighting is great in there, all the LED screens. The only thing that we really need to avoid is like shooting towards the hard cam and the standard TV tropes that, for the most part, in GCW we don't follow. I always have to explain to new camera ops, like I did this past weekend in WXW in Germany. I had to first thing I told the camera guys, well, I know you guys are used to TV, but you can shoot at the hard cam. Like, I don't worry about that. Like, because the most important thing is to get the shot. And if someone's working that direction and your shot is the best shot, but it's facing the hard cam, it's fine. Whereas like an MOW, that's traditional TV, that's obviously something that you're frowned on and you're not supposed to do.
So before I turn it over to John, I'm just curious in terms of the framed images behind you. Is that a card set? What are those drawings?
Oh, that is a Pro Jam collage of Pro Jam posters.
Nice.
Actually, I have two of them as well. And then the Pro Jam Chicago poster in the back there. I used to go to many Pro Jam concerts before wrestling started to pick up.
Nice.
Now, John, what are you up to next? Where will you be working? What are you going to be doing? What's next?
Well, thankfully, I have the weekend off. I'm still going to go hang out at a show in Buffalo tomorrow, just because there's a lot of friends I miss that I don't get to see too often now locally. But other than that, we have GCW next weekend in Atlantic City, 3 shows in Atlantic City, then immediately fly out to Tokyo for 3 shows. and then straight to LA for GCW at the UCC, and then thankfully have another week off. So those are few and far between at this point.
Love it. Where can everybody find you on social media and see what you're up to?
Twitter, it's GPW Ashe. So it's GPW is Go Pro Wrestling, even though we're not using that name. But it's GPW Ashe, ASHE. That's probably the best place to find me. You can find me on Facebook, but Facebook's usually don't usually post too much on there. Don't usually post too much on Twitter either, but I'm here and there.
All right, John, thank you so much. Good luck with GC Dub, ML Dub, and everything else, but appreciate all the time.
All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Take care.
Now, Lavi, let's get into a little bit of the news once again. What the heck is going on with Abima, WWE, Cyber Agent, and maybe Pro Wrestling Noah and the Great Muta?
Yeah, so I think everyone's trying to figure it out. Of course, our friend at Fight Opinion is really on top of these things. But when I first heard that WWE was going back live to Japan, and I saw Abima, I was like, Abima, like, haven't we seen that name before? And then I was thinking about it. I think they've done some of the Noah New Japan collaborations, and we've commented before, like, New Japan is now not, this show isn't on New Japan World. It's not on this. It's on Abima. So Abima's backers are Cyber Agent and TV Asahi. Cyber Agent owns Noah, DDT, and the various other promotions. And TV Asahi is involved with New Japan, from what I understand. So the conclusion there was that sort of like gyms, the local promotions in the light of WWE, because maybe those other promotions don't have weekly wrestling that airs. I'm not sure about that. Like, I'm not sure how that will shake out, but it's just interesting to see, like, this Cyber Agent, which we've talked about, is like really a sleeping giant. It's a gigantic company in Japan that wanted to make inroads in the U.S. They had the bounty and so on, which I had emailed to try and collect that, but to get more publicity. But now Kaiji Muto is talking about the possibility of WWE and Pro Wrestling Noah. Noah is also on Abima, a member of the Cyber Agent group. With this, WWE is also Abima. There's a possibility that something about WWE and Noah will be born with this. So it could be a whole lot of nothing, meaning that Abima is a television station. They happen to be involved in other pro wrestling companies. Strategically, it made sense to put WWE on the air. Or on the other end of the spectrum, this could be something a lot more to it in terms of involvement with other pro wrestling companies, or taking a piece or a bigger piece of the pie of Japan.
Interesting with Muta involved. Obviously, new WWE Hall of Famer. So it's interesting to see that and see maybe a possible WWE Noah deal, or something with them. But another interesting thing is, what about New Japan and their TV distribution?
So we've talked about how in the past they've been on. At some point, it was called Eurosport, and later a variation of Discovery in France and so on. But apparently they weren't over the air for the while, and now they're coming back, but more on a streaming basis. So New Japan returns to television in the UK, France, and 35 more countries. I won't name them all, but Israel, Kosovo, Serbia, Belgium, and so on. For first a special, but then regular programming as well, from what I understand. New Japan debuts on the Extreme Sports Channel on Pluto TV in Europe, and beyond a little bit, with a full airing of Destruction in Kobe, headlined between Yota Tsuji and Will Ospreay. Catch all the action Friday at 7 p.m., as well as with French commentary in select markets. New Japan on Extreme Sports will air in many territories, like we said, in 35 different nations.
It's interesting that, obviously New Japan, we're talking about what's going on with them, but how do they figure into Wrestle Dream? And are they really technically a part of Wrestle Dream? I know some of the New Japan guys are, but are they figured in? And how is that show doing for AEW, that pay per view coming up?
Yeah, they're apparently not figured in well enough, um, because, like we've talked about, AEW struggling with their ticket sales for the most part. New Japan is with their standalone sales, but at least in Toronto, when you added in um, New Japan into the AEW mix and it felt more of a collaboration, you had a big success here. This Wrestle Dream, it's sort of it's a tribute to the life of Inoki, uh, which in turn basically means New Japan to many people, but it's not exactly a New Japan collaboration. They're just bringing talent in. So I think that was a missed opportunity. As of a little while ago, I'm sure more tickets have moved, that there was under 5,000 tickets that had been distributed, again, in another NBA-sized arena. So really, they're booking out these gigantic places, and maybe with the ticket prices and so on, they're doing well financially, but it kind of looks embarrassing, I guess is the most candid way to put it. Of course, this week there was news that Tony Khan might have purchased New Japan, which I don't think so, especially with the other announcements that they've been making, which we'll talk about later or soon. But to me, I guess AEW is stretched right now, right? Most of their shows aren't doing well in terms of television ratings, in terms of live events. So to take on another brand when they haven't done much with Ring of Honor doesn't make much sense, except if the price is right and the opportunity is right, like to acquire the library. And I wouldn't plan on promoting in Japan. I think it would make sense to get like the territorial rights for footage, although it's a little bit confusing because sometimes he'll say a television station owns more of those rights. But to have promotional rights in the US in terms of New Japan, which we'll talk about soon again, is linking with MLW, they're doing stuff with Impact, they've lent talent to Defy. It's kind of all over the place, which sometimes is good. But I think to have the brand managed better in North America, or at least the US and Canada, would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it was surprising to hear the Tony rumor. I think he was surprised by that, but it does seem like with New Japan and AEW, it seems like when they co-promote, it's a home run. But separately lately, it hasn't been. Like New Japan has a show coming up in Vegas too, right? It doesn't seem like when they do stuff on their own, it's as successful. But when they co-promote, they're hitting home runs.
Right, and it's changed so much. Like, was it even a year ago we were talking about the promotional possibilities of New Japan? Maybe just several months ago with Mercedes Monet, who I believe is still under contract to them, right, but is injured, having access to Mox and later Omega, um, you know, these sort of things that if they were to concentrate on just a few shows as opposed to like this wider spread that they had, they would do well. But now they're not. And I don't know, like for big time shows, who can do well at the moment in the US outside of WWE and AW to their own degree. Like October 28th in Vegas, Sam's Town, right? Just 800, 900 seat venue. There's still first row tickets available a month ago. In Garland, Texas, several weeks out, but there are also front row tickets available. Um, and now they've announced that they're coming back to San Jose Civic Center. And that seems to bring, diminishing returns each time outside of like a major match or a signing. So I don't know, what they should do in the US. Maybe it's, to pull back and every couple of years have a special show, and it feels very special because they're not here all the time unless they are making money with these shows. And I know they've talked about how they've enjoyed building their strong brand and they were able to bring it back to Japan and sell at Korakuen Hall, but I just don't see much there. Like I don't see much light there for New Japan as a live event business, and that's very different from how I saw it even 6 months ago.
So as far as New Japan, not doing maybe as great like we're saying on our own, but what the heck is going on with them, CMLL and MLW? What is this team up?
Yeah, I don't know. This is the first case where 1 + 1 + 1 doesn't equal 3 to me. Certainly, New Japan CMLL have their own thing going on, which has been successful forever. But adding MLW, it seems like MLW is always announcing like collaborations with promotions from Japan, from Mexico, from Europe, and I don't know if something. I mean, something always comes out of it, but I don't know if a big thing always comes out of it. But here, like, if you were to pick, like, okay, who would be your prime promotions that you want to work with to link in with this, like, New Japan and CMLL relationship, which is a hard one to penetrate, would be like ideal, right? Sort of like that Ring of Honor position of a number of years ago, but it just doesn't mean much anymore. And in the press release, they didn't say much. The three world class organizations will unite for a variety of crossover collaborations commencing this October. The strategic alliance creates the ultimate stage for each organization to showcase their signature fighting styles and athletes. If it's like sending a couple of wrestlers from New Japan, a couple from CMLL to an MLW taping at the 2300, like that doesn't have much impact. So, I mean, it's not going to hurt them. So, they might as well do it, but it just doesn't seem like a big possibility right now in terms of like growth as these things have seen in the past. And there was just a snippet that was shared from Cubs fan from the Observer. So part of the reason, or maybe the reason cited why Sam Adonis is no longer coming to MLW is because he's with AAA, clearly. So there's that relationship. So that's already a minus. Now, they wanted to send Jacob Fatu to CMLL, although he has legal issues, so it's hard to, I guess, cross country borders. So, he's restricted, in that way, or they're restricted from sending him. So it's really something curious to watch. In the past, it's been, I guess, without saying bleak, like a whole lot of nothing, but curious to see, what comes out of this. And I think New Japan needs sort of like a reset in terms of their strategy. If they were bought by Tony Khan, like, who are you working with? What are you hoping to gain out of it? I mean, if they're getting like, talent fees and like sort of like as a booking agent or whatever it is, that's, and there's no investment on their part, well, that's like sort of found money. So they might as well. But if you're really looking to create like a strong presence and brand here in the US again, maybe it's like, it's just too muddied right now.
What is going on with AEW over there on LinkedIn? Listed as a top startup, is that right?
Yes, so Luke Young, Chris Harrington sharing this, of course, as a VP of LinkedIn, which I saw on there. But LinkedIn had its top startups, right? It's funny, like everyone's always like, well, they're not number one. It's hard to forget, or it's hard to remember, right, that they only started in 2019. They're not exactly a little company that could. It's, as we talked about, multi-billionaires running the company, not that they're going to put all their money into this smartly, but just a few snippets here. Full-time headcount 105. I'm very curious about a full-time headcount. So that, I guess that wouldn't, unless you're counting, full-time professional wrestlers, I'd be very surprised if they have a staff of over 100, although it takes a lot to put something together. Most common skills: graphic design, video production, broadcasting. Most common job titles: graphic producer, social media. They're always hiring. Like, I don't know what's going on with the term of social media, but that comes up all the time. Maybe they're growing that role. Largest job functions: media and communications, marketing, art and design, which makes sense. What they do: AEW is a professional wrestling promotion aimed to serve as an alternative to mainstream wrestling. So I found that really curious. In addition to weekly matches covered on channels like TBS and TNT, the entertainment company's multi-platform content spans a variety of channels.
What about the NWA? What's going on with them?
So this is a fun little one, and Billy Corgan is enjoying himself. Why not? I don't know if this necessarily like has a broad appeal, but NWA is going to be doing a a power taping at the Robarts Arena in Sarasota. Apparently, a Championship Wrestling from Florida regular stop. Have to, John, next time you have an opportunity, ask the Taskmaster about this particular venue.
Yeah.
Great memories of that. But, this was a venue around the 60s and the 70s and so on. So they have, again, it's a bigger venue. They have a modest rows of seats plus general admission on sale. But what's fun is that when it's run by a city, like as a facility, it's easier to get information. So I went to the website and it was interesting to see. Not necessarily that they're using all this and they won't, but the maximum capacity for the building is 4,845. The newly renovated chair seating holds 2,696 with handrails and solo grips, so you know that it's compliant, of course, with disability law. People are, well, I don't know how many people are curious, but I'm always curious when you rent a venue, like what are the costs? So that was public as well. So it costs generally $1,800 a day. For every chair, it's $2 each. To set up is $900. And then to use different things like the sound system is another rate. So you guess like a few $1,000s to rent this venue.
Interesting, very interesting. What is going on with some venue improvements, some government money? Speaking of venues.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see, and I think it really relates to the perception of pro wrestling. Like Providence, Rhode Island, a town I know well. It's always been a great town for WWF, at least. Certainly not for World Pass when they passed through there once, but for WWF, WWE. So as they're working on improving their venues, one of the things that is mentioned is that pro wrestling helps to bring them publicity. So Governor Dan McKee visited the Rhode Island Convention Center and Amica Mutual Pavilion to tour capital improvements that are reinvigorating the facilities that attract hundreds of thousands of patrons annually. The Amica Mutual Pavilion and Convention Center serve as the home to some of the most popular and well-attended attractions and events across the entire state. And I'm proud that we're finally making the necessary investments to keep the tradition alive well into the future, said the governor. Whenever the venue is featured nationally as host to concerts, college basketball, professional wrestling, or any other event, it should be a source of pride for all Rhode Islanders.
What about Battle Creek Wrestling?
Yes. So this annual show has caught my eye for quite a while as an independent undertaking. Kellogg Arena, we're all familiar with it as a regular pro wrestling stop, sort of like a mid-sized type of venue. Certainly the Battle Creek, the home of Rob Van Dam, so he'll be headlining Battle in the Creek 3. I'm not sure if he did 1 and 2. It's pretty likely. Rob Van Dam has become a world-famous entertainer, competing as a professional wrestler on all courts of the globe. But it all started in Battle Creek, and now he's coming back to his hometown. He's the centerpiece of Battle in the Creek 3, the whole damn show, a pro wrestling event at the Kellogg Arena. This is going to be a full circle moment for me. I've stopped off the back in Battle Creek a couple of times over the years, but never before has it felt like a homecoming like this show. We're calling it the whole damn show because it's built around me. We've been working on bringing a show like this to Battle Creek for about a year, and glad it's happening. It's the 3rd year for Battle of the Creek at Kellogg Arena, but first-time native Van Dam will be involved. Okay, so that answers my question. Also scheduled to be a part will be Stan Severn, who's from the area, having grown up in Coldwater, as well as Brian Cage and Alex Hammerstone. The event, organized by Team Blue Brands, will have tickets starting at $30. I'm from Battle Creek, and I want to do as much as possible for this town, Gary Edwards, the CEO, said. More than anything, it's about bringing in a big event and giving folks here in southern Lower Michigan a reason to be excited about Battle Creek again. Van Dam is also excited to speak at his alma mater. So they had a modest reserved ticket set up. It was hard to tell because the circles remain the same color on the sales map if they were still on sale or they were sold. So I just didn't have the time to hand count it, but it looked like a fair amount of tickets remaining. But I think that it'll be a good number coming out of the show. Curious about it.
What about some impactful free agents and some other talent challenges that are going on out there?
Yeah, so three interesting stories, maybe that are indicative of the current environment. One is, of course, we know all the WWE releases. Some will land, some will try and not land so well, some will just go on to do other things. But to me, in terms of, I'm not sure what his career was like before WWE, but certainly being through WWE, but also being very true to his own values and sort of building his own brand. Mustafa Ali posted that he's available for a world tour, and he smartly set up a specific email address for that, so less likely for people to bother him. But I think, in the right context, like as a Ronin, like, just like not necessarily going to the highest bidder, but sort of like where he wants to go, what would be meaningful to him in this career. For a good year to 18 months, even without having to reinvent himself, I assume he would do really, really well. Matt Cardona has adapted to the independent scene in a very unique way, so you can't say that he'll necessarily do that well. Everyone is different, but I think when his name is on a card, it'll certainly move ticket sales. So that's one thing. The next thing was that PCO, one of my favorites, is gone from Impact Wrestling, and he had recounted, it was translated and so on, so I'm not sure the exact story, but he had recounted that they were trying to get him to sign, and it was a little bit of negotiations, and then they stopped responding, and then he left and so on. So it wasn't necessarily that he was always playing to leave Impact, but to me, I'm looking at this date in December that AEW has in Montreal. And Montreal's always been a great wrestling town, but it's been a huge town, even involving Carl Ouellette 30 years ago nearly, when you have a native French-Canadian performer. And I think even for just a TV, or maybe you build it up a few TVs before and then pay off with a near win or an almost world title win on Dynamite or something like that, that would be an amazing story. So I think the story writes itself. So that's just my bit of booking, but just in terms of talent. But it also shows that a company like Impact could sort of feel that they could play hardball a little bit more, or knowing that there's all these talents that are new and flush to the market. And finally, in a different side, that Eddie Kingston is pulling himself off of shows, even the 5 shows where he's been a regular, to concentrate on being Ring of Honor champion in Japan, AEW, all of that. So it kind of put Defy in a difficult spot because he did it the day before. I don't think anyone is blaming him. Everyone respects him very much, but it goes to show that if you have the talent under contract, and he's talented as well, of course, you can't fully rely upon that as the basis to building up your independence. You have to have other strategies. A lot of people were benefiting from AEW talent sort of floating around to different places. It may be the case less so depending on talent, or at one point it might not be the case. You have to have your own strategies.
What is going on with OVW and the Davis Arena? Am I seeing another sellout? They're kicking ass and taking names.
Yeah, so your friend of mine, Mr. Spectacular, front and center. So as of this recording, the second sellout has happened. And then as I was preparing the notes, the third sellout in a row is likely. Several days out, already half the tickets were gone. So it shows the power of Netflix. We weren't sure. I wasn't sure, but look, it's happening. So curious to see if this is where it stops. Now, Hallie J, hopefully I'm not messing that up, she was supposed to have a WWE tryout from what I read, and then from what I read that was canceled. So she may not be going anywhere. And for OVW at least, that's a great thing because she's one of the breakout stars of this limited series. So to know that they have her every week is something that they can build around.
What about your favorite promotion, Sakyabon?
So interestingly, there of course PW Insight and so on. Different people cover the results, but in terms of the articles and like resonance later, um, it was more of like a fashion centric magazine where they're trying to do a very difficult balance, sort of like they're not it's pro wrestling, so people that are Joshi fans, which is a very small number in the U.S., but passionate one. But then also like to connect themselves to anime and manga, where like people who want to try pro wrestling. And then they're also trying to be like high fashion and high art, which is another very difficult thing to break into. So just a snippet that I grabbed, which sort of gives more insight into some of where the monies are being directed. Like the girl gangs before them, the wrestlers were perfectly outfitted with costumes by Olympia Latan, the designer known for her book cover clutches, hats by milliner Stephen Jones, who was designed for Princess Diana and Dior, Jean-Paul Gaultier, Thierry Mugler, and Vivienne Westwood, Runaways, and custom nails by Mel Kawajiri, whose clients include Cardi B, Dua Lipa, and Seth Rogen. Lee Tan drew inspiration for the costumes, anime, and the wrestlers themselves. We worked in parallel by deciding on the characters we wanted to have in the league: a clown, a nerd, a biker, and then choosing which characters fit the way the wrestlers look at their personalities. I wanted it to appeal to people who aren't necessarily fans of wrestling or interested in fashion, beauty, and anime. Maybe there is like a crossover with WoW possible the way that they pick their characters.
Yeah, for sure. And finishing up, just two little tidbits here of stories. You got something on Championship Wrestling with Dave Marquez, and you have something on the Dungeon Wrestling scene with
Yeah.
Calgary.
So Dave Marquez, always something cooking. So great television in Arizona. They first got on one of the Arizona stations, and now Gray is covering them on all their sports regional networks. So a nice little win for Dave Marquez and the Unite team. And Dungeon Wrestling, they'll be back in the Victoria Pavilion, which has seemed like a really successful home site for them. And you know. Bulldog and Harry Smith, and of course Nick Aldis is connected to the promotion as well. So a nice match on top, and you have that being promoted, of course, by Bret Hart's sons. Should he be available? You always know Bret Hart will be connected there. So building up something unique and interesting in Calgary.
Very, very cool. Always something cool going on up there with Marquez, or over there with Marquez, and up there with Dungeon Wrestling and the Hart Boys for sure. So let's hit the plugs. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Two Man Power Trip. Check the website, tmptempire.com. Lavi, what do you got?
Check me out on Twitter, LavieMark, LAVIEMARG. This is where some of these stories are shared first as they come across my purview. Check out some of my long form articles on Lion Cub job search, and check out our LinkedIn group, The Business of the Business, and stay tuned for next week, episode 150.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. See you right back here next week for episode 150 of the Business of the Business. We'll see you next week, folks.